We're back with the 330 Trail Boss. If you watched the past couple videos, we got this thing running. It hadn't been running for years. We got it running, runs pretty good. Did notice when I was test riding it though that the rear foot pedal did not work at all. We had good brake with the hand lever, but the pedal was not working. It had no resistance at all. It was going to the floor as soon as you pressed it. Off video, I found out that the bleeder, there's two different bleeders on this. There's one for the front handbrake that controls the front brakes and the rear. It's combined on this, and then the foot brake is this line and comes directly here. It had been over tightened at some point and stripped out the threads on the inside, so the fluid had been leaking out from the threads of this bleeder. And I put more fluid in it, found that it was leaking here, but obviously we didn't have rear brake because it was leaking out of here again. I tried drilling this out, putting a helicoil in, putting the bleeder back in, but there's not because this is on a raised tower here, there's not enough material there. After I drilled it out big enough, there wasn't enough material to put threads in, and it just wasn't going to work. It was going to end up cracking this and leaking, so we just ordered a new caliper. It is a cheap caliper, but it works. So as long as it's providing consistent good brakes, I'm good with it. But we got the new caliper installed already. I did all that off video. The front handbrake works fine. It's applying pressure back here, works good. After we got the caliper on there with this bleeder and everything, the new bleeder, I got the foot pedal to pump up a little bit. So I bled it out, used a vacuum bleeder, made sure there was no air in the line at all. Got new seals on all the banjo bolts, nothing's leaking. And now, if we have pedal initially, but if you hold on it, it goes away. It completely bleeds out. Usually the most common suspect would be in the master cylinder here. The push rod has two O-rings on it, and usually those O-rings will go bad and leak right here. And you can see it's been leaking a little bit, but that's, I believe inside here is where our pressure loss is. We've got the master cylinder fill up here, runs down through this line. We've got no leaks there. We know there's no air in the system. This is the line that goes to the rear caliper, and we've got new washers, or new sealing washers here, and the banjo bolt is clear. Everything's good there. We have no leaks in the system. So I'm pretty sure on this one there's two O-rings. There should be, not O-rings, but seals. Two seals on this push rod. When you push the brake, it builds pressure. That push rod pushes, the seals compress. Obviously it compresses the brake fluid, provides hydraulic pressure to push the piston out, close the pads, stop the machine, obviously. I think what's happening on this machine, since it has initial pedal and then it loses pressure, I think if there's two seals on this one, which I'm pretty sure there is, I would say the one that's further up this way is probably busted, or if it's not completely broken, maybe has a cut in it or some deterioration on it. I believe that's what's happening, is why we have pressure immediately, and then after that fluid gets compressed, it pushes past that seal. I think that's why we're losing pressure. So I'm going to pull this master cylinder off. I already have a new one because I'm pretty confident this is the problem. We'll pull that off of there, put the new one on, see if we can get brake, take this one apart and see if what we thought was wrong is what was actually wrong. Since this is pretty simple, I'm not going to record taking it off, that kind of stuff. I'll pull it off there, and I don't think it's just two bolts down here, and you can pull that out. So, and obviously take the fill hose off, and then the banjo bolt, we need to take that out. But I've got a drain pan here to catch the fluid that's going to leak out. All right, we've got the rear master cylinder off of there. Let's just go ahead and take it apart now and see if we can find what the issue was. There's a little cutout right here, by the way, so you can take this dust seal out. I believe it's just a dust seal. Apparently that seal, along with when it's mounted in the machine and you have the brake lever hooked up, keeps it. I guess there's no need for a retaining clip apparently. You can see that it operates nice and smoothly. Let's go ahead, pull the plunger out. First, I see there's a little bit of wear right here. You can see, I don't know if you can see those grooves with the lighting, but there is some wear on the plunger itself. Let's dry those seals off and see what kind of condition they're in. I don't see any major issues so far. I mean, obviously the plunger is warm, so that probably means that the seals are warm too. Or the seals can't. Yeah, you can see it's worn. There's kind of a flat spot in the plunger there. And that seal looks like it does have some deterioration in it. This would be the first seal right here that, oh yeah, it's got some, I don't know if you can see that, but it's got some deterioration on it. Some pieces missing, so that's going to be letting fluid through. The rear seal looks okay though. That's probably where we were getting the pressure that we were getting. But once it blows past that seal, then it's able to come to this chamber and be returned to the fill. So it loses a lot of pressure once it gets past that. This secondary seal is just so you're not losing fluid out this way, and it acts as kind of a backup. So you don't have absolutely no brakes if this seal blows. But if it's weak, then you know that front seal is probably bad, which that one is. We could just order new seals, replace them, but this whole master cylinder, well, especially with this plunger worn out, it's probably good that we're just replacing the whole thing. It's pretty cheap, so we'll go ahead and put the new one on there and see if we can get any brakes. Sorry, I've got brake fluid all over my expensive camera. Not happy about that. You can see we've got the new master cylinder here. New plunger, everything's brand new in there. We're gonna go ahead and get this mounted up. There'll be 2 bolts. It will set like this bolt here. Obviously I don't know if you can see it. Sorry about the lighting. I need to get a spotlight set up so you can see these videos. But when you push the foot brake, the back side of it here pivots and pushes up, and that's what pushes the plunger right here. Pushes it in, fluid comes in here from the fill, goes into the plunger there. The seal should keep the pressure. When you press that in, send the brake fluid out through the brake line to the rear caliper, push the piston out, apply brake pressure. Okay, we've got the new caliper installed here. I have not tightened up the banjo completely yet. I've put a little bit of fluid in, letting it fill up the caliper, or the master cylinder. And then I'll tighten that up, and I'm gonna go ahead and break the line loose back here and fill up our reserve, just to let it gravity feed, speed up the process a little bit. Let it gravity feed down through the fill. It's already coming out here, you can see, so we're good there. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten up this banjo bolt because we know we have straight fluid coming through there now. As long as the reserve does not empty out during that, you know that there's no air possibly in there, so we know we're good to there. Okay, so we've got the banjo bolt tight, we have fluid coming in. I'm gonna go crack the brake line loose in the rear. Basically what we're doing is we're gonna allow gravity to push fluid through without letting the reserve empty, because that will let air in. We're gonna keep that reserve full and let gravity feed the fluid through and push out any air all the way to the back of the system. So we're gonna leave the back brake line loose, keep it filled, and then we should have fluid pushing all the way through. When we get a steady stream of fluid coming out the back, then we'll tighten it up and do a short bleed. Gonna crack the brake line open back here at the masters, or at the caliper. And we will just leave that open and allow the fluid to work gravity feed down to there. Once we get a constant stream here, we'll tighten that up, and then we'll do the same thing with the bleeder, and then we'll pump them up, see how much brake we have, and see if we need to bleed off any air with this bleeder. At this point, we've got a consistent drip of fluid coming out of the brake line, so I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it up. We just tightened up the banjo bolt back here. We know we have a consistent flow of fluid going to the banjo bolt through that line. So now we're gonna open up our bleeder. And we're gonna let the fluid gravity feed to there. As you can see, it is dripping consistent fluid. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten that up. Be very gentle with these. Remember, I had a stripped one before, and that's what caused all the problems. You don't have to kill them. Just snug them up. Let's go back up here and make sure our reserve still has fluid in it. It does. Now let's see if we have any brake pressure. There is, there's plenty of brake there. It's going down, it's a little bit spongy in the initial. I think it should start about right there. But it does have brake. It is stopping the rear wheels. So I think there's a little bit of air trapped in the end by the bleeder. And that's probably why it's a little bit spongy. So I'm gonna go ahead and bleed that off. And as you can see, it doesn't go to the floor like it did before. It keeps consistent pressure. So we're good to go. So we just chased down the problem with the brakes on this machine. Initially, it had zero brake through the foot brake. It had good hand brake. We chased down that there was a stripped out bleeder screw on the rear caliper that went to this brake line. It was stripped out, so the fluid had been pushing past that bleeder when you push the pedal, and eventually it ran out of fluid, so it had no brakes. We tried to drill out and helicoil the old bleeder screw, but there wasn't enough material to allow a bigger bleeder screw in there. You couldn't even put threads in without it trying to break, so we just replaced the caliper with a cheap one. That got us some brake, but when we'd hold the pedal down, we would lose pressure, and we had no leaks. We traced the brake line all the way from the rear caliper up to the master cylinder, up to the fill tube, and we had zero leaks. So we knew that it was losing pressure, probably in the plunger of the master cylinder itself. We took that apart. When we took that apart, we did confirm that the O-ring has deterioration, so the fluid was leaking past. The plunger sits in here like that. It fills through this from the fill tube. Fluid comes in through an orifice on the inside of the bore here. It goes into here, and when you press the foot pedal, those seals seal against this cylinder here, and it compresses the fluid, sending it through the brake line to the caliper, pushes the piston out, pushes your pads together, stops the machine. But when we were pushing it, we were getting pressure initially, and then it would bleed past the O-ring, and that was making it lose pressure.